Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Dave's Math Channel. I'm your host, David Tear, and this is my second daily math problem on Benford's Law. I did one about a week ago. This is a follow-up, and it's a follow-up to the last problem. It's a little more detailed. Anyway, let's begin. So here's a problem statement. Um, I'll just read it. Benford's law is an empirical statistical law which states that for a particular sample of n data points, x sub m greater than 0 for all positive, with n ranging from 1 to n and k ranging from 1 to 9, the expected number of data values with leading digit k is equal to, given by formula 1, which says e sub k is n times the base 10 logarithm of 1 plus 1 over k. That's Benford's law. Those are the expected frequencies we get. I talked about this in my last video on Benford's law. Um, anyway, for such a sample, you can do a chi-squared test to determine whether Benford's law holds. And the way you do that is you calculate this thing called the chi-squared statistic given by formula 2. Namely, chi-squared is a sum of k going from 1 to 9 of this quantity, this fraction, the numerator of OK minus EK quantity squared. And the denominator will have EK. I already told you what E sub K is. It's given my formula 1. What's OK? OK is the observed number of data values with each digit K. And this is how a chi-squared test works in general. I don't know how many guys learn this in statistics, but this is actually a very useful statistical um, uh, way of testing data set. Um, and then the way you kind of either confirm or refute the hypothesis. This is an example of hypothesis testing. Our null hypothesis is that um, our data set does obey the Benford's law. And if that's the case, then what we do, the way we do hypothesis testing, we start with a cutoff, a probability cutoff, a p-value, they call it. The most commonly used p-value in statistics is 0.05. That means that if this value of chi-squared is too big, meaning our data is ruled out, um, what do we mean by too big? It means that if the null hypothesis was really true, then we would expect with the 95% confidence that chi-squared should be less than a particular cutoff value corresponding to p equals 0.05. In this case, that cutoff value is 15.51. You can look this up in any table on the chi-square distribution. We have 8 degrees of freedom because the number of degrees of freedom is always one less. If this is a one-dimensional data set, there's only one. It's a linear list. It only depends on one parameter, namely k, the digit, in other words, which can vary from 1 to 9. And since there's 9 possible digits, we subtract 1 from that. That gives us the number of degrees of freedom of our data. We have 8 degrees of freedom. And you can look this up. With 8 degrees of freedom and p-value 0.05, the critical value of the chi-squared statistic is 15.51. And what that means, like I said, is that if the null hypothesis is true, namely if our data does obey Benford's law, then there's a 95% probability that the value chi-squared we calculate will be less than this critical value of 15.51. So that's kind of how we test whether our data obeys Benford's law or not. We just compute the value chi-squared for these data sets. And you can use as many points from your data set as you want. I'm just using 1,000 here. I haven't even told you what the things we're testing are. So the problem, I haven't even gotten to the problem yet. I just kind of explained to you about Benford's law and the chi-squared distribution. But now we need some actual data to test it with. So I have these three sequences. The first one, x sub m, is 2 to the m power. This is actually the same example I went over last week when I was talking about Benford's law, and we showed last time that this particular data set does seem to obey Benford's law. As a matter of fact, this almost like does it too well. Um, so anyway, that's our first data set. This exponential function x sub m equals 2 to the m. Our next data set is kind of similar. It's actually m equals m factorial. Um, because an example of an exponential function, x sub m factorial actually grows faster than exponentially. And then the last example, sort of like B, is this is a primorial. So I'm saying x sub m is pm primorial. What that means, p primorial is a product of all the primes up to p. So for instance, 2 primorial is just 2, 3 primorials, 2 times 3, which is 6, 5 primorials, 2 times 3 times 5, which is 30, and so on. But I'm doing pm primorial, so 5 would be P3 as the third prime. 97 is the 25th prime. So X25 would be the product of all the primes up to 97, which is 25. I think you get the idea. This is another very fast growing function, by the way. So anyway, that's the problem statement. So how do we actually solve this problem? Well, I wrote a bunch of Mathematica code to do it. We need to calculate a lot of different things here. The first thing we have to be able to calculate is the leading digit of any given data point, any given positive real number. X, leading digit of x, is just the floor of x divided by 10 to the it's basically the largest power of 10 that's less than x. 10 to the 4 of log 10 of x. I think you can convince yourself that that's the largest power of 10 that's less than or equal to x. So, for instance, a leading digit of 627, that would be 627 divided by 100, which is 6.27. We're taking the 4, that'll give us 6. So I think you kind of see how that works. Anyway, so once we have this function leading digit, we can use it to calculate the leading digits of each of the sequences and our problem statement, parts A through C. The first one, 2, A and B, are easy to do because you can automatically compute in Mathematica 2 to the m power and m factorial. We just do that for m going from 1 to 1000 for each of these sequences, and we compute the leading digits. This is going to give us sequences of length 1000, each element of which is a digit from 1 to 9, and the digits are the leading digits of each of these sequences. But the last one's a little trickier, primorial or prime. This is what I had to write myself because I don't think there's a built-in mathematical function for calculating primorial, so I just wrote one myself, but it's easy enough to do. One line function. Primorial prime m, that would be p sub m number symbol, primorial symbol. That's just the product of the k prime, k ranging from 1 to m. So for instance, primorial prime 1 would be 2, primorial prime 2 is 2 times 3, which is 6, primorial prime 3 is 2 times 3 times 5, which is 30. Think you get the idea. So anyway, once we have that function, we can use it to make a third table, the table of the leading digits of the primorials of all the first 1000 primes. Anyway, so that gives us our data. That gives us our leading digits. And then once we have our leading digits, we need to calculate the frequencies of each leading digit in each of these tables. And I wrote the function below to do that. This is a more complicated function, but I think it's pretty easy to see that this function will return the frequencies we want, because all we're doing is counting here. We're taking our table T, which could be any of these three tables, T1, T2, T3, and then we're just counting how many instances there are where the T sub K, where the yeah, what am I saying here? Yeah, result. Result is the thing that's the resulting table that's coming out of this function. So result one, for instance, will be the number of instances where T sub K is one, or T sub one, and so when K is one, we're increasing result one. Yeah, actually, K is the index of the elements of T. I'm mixing up the elements. So D is the digit, I guess. We don't actually use D here, but T sub K is the digit. So we're increasing T sub K each time we find an instance of that digit. Anyway, this works. So that's what we're doing. And then here's the results. So finally, here's some results. And these three tables I'm calling LD1, LD2, and LD3, these are just the leading digit frequencies. Um, yeah, of the elements of T1, T2, and T3 respectively. And I think you can see that they all have pretty much the same distribution. I mean, as it turns out, they do all three of these data sets do follow Benford's law. The last thing I do is I calculate the chi-squared value for each of them. And the last function I wrote here is this function on the bottom left called Benford chi-square. And it just does what it's supposed to. It goes through the leading digits, and that's the observed value. I'm calling it obs. That's the thing I was calling O of D. I'm using D instead of K here, I guess. And then E of D would just be n times the base 10 logarithm of 1 plus 1 over D. That's the expected value. Okay. I don't show that here, but it's pretty close to the values given in these three tables on the top. So those are our observed values and our expected values, and then we calculate the chi-squared statistic, which is the sum of just the observed minus expected quantity squared divided by expected. We sum that for D going from 1 to 9. That gives us our results. So anyway, that's how you calculate the chi-squared statistic. And on the bottom right, I just showed the results. And there's one interesting thing you should know. First of all, the first thing you should note is that since our cutoff value was 15.51 approximately, I think you can see that all three of these distributions have a chi-squared value that's less than that. That means they've all passed this test. That means, as far as we can tell, all three of these distributions do indeed obey the Benford law. They passed our hypothesis test at the 5% cutoff value. But I think you should notice something else here. I mean, notice that the last two examples, part B, where that was n factorial, and part C, that was p sub n primorial, these actually are pretty close to the cutoff value. Remember, the cutoff value was 15.51, and then for part B, we got 8.68 approximately. For part C, we got about 11.1. These are kind of what you might expect. I mean, when you do a chi-squared test, another thing you should watch out for is values of chi-squared that are too low, because that can also give you useful information. And if you'll notice the value for part A, this is a very low value chi-squared, 0.158551. That's about 100 times smaller than our cutoff value, 15. This was just a random data set. We wouldn't expect it would be that low. There's actually a reason it's this low. And I think I talked about it last week. This is an exponential function, 2 to the n. And this is kind of tailor-made. Series like this, these are tailor-made to obey Benford's law. Benford's law was kind of defined in such a way that exponential functions would automatically satisfy them. And I think here we have 1,000 data points. If we have a million, this would be even smaller. I think it asymptotically approaches zero as the number of the size of our data goes to infinity. Whereas I don't think the other two do. I think these are more random looking. So I just thought I'd mention that. I mean, B and C do obey Benford's law, but not for any, kind of um, intended reason. They just kind of do because Benford's law is sort of a general law that is satisfied by a lot of different kinds of sequences, not just exponential ones. And I'm sure you could think of a lot of other sequences for which it holds as well. So anyway, that completes my video for today on my continuation on Benford's law. So thank you for watching. Long live math, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye.